Why are some international high-ticket closers crushing it in US markets while others with better English skills are struggling to close deals? The answer isn't what you think. It's not about accent, vocabulary, or even grammar. It's about two specific skills that separate the top 1% of international closers from everyone else: rapid listening comprehension and spontaneous verbal fluency. These aren't just language skills, they're sales superpowers. When you can instantly understand subtle client objections and respond with confident clarity, you don't just sound professional, you sound like someone worth $10,000 per deal. Meet Sarah, a brilliant closer from Germany who speaks perfect textbook English but can't break $5,000 monthly commissions in the US market. She knows every grammar rule in the book. She never makes mistakes with past perfect tense or conditional sentences. Her emails read like they came from a university professor. But when she gets on sales calls, something weird happens. Prospects start checking their phones. They give short answers. They say they need to think about it. Sarah can't figure out why her English, which teachers always praised, seems to work against her in sales. Here's the thing that's gonna blow your mind. While Sarah struggles with her perfect grammar, Carlos from Mexico is closing $15,000 deals left and right. His English isn't perfect. He says things like, "I'm gonna show you something that's gonna change everything for you." He drops articles. He uses contractions everywhere. Grammar teachers would hate his English, but prospects love talking to him. They trust him. They buy from him. This creates a massive problem for international closers. The same grammar perfection that got you good grades is actually killing your deals. When you focus on speaking grammatically correct English, you create hesitation in your speech. Your brain becomes a grammar filter. Before you say anything, you check, is this the right tense? Should I use whom or who? Are my prepositions correct? This mental checking creates tiny pauses that prospects notice. They hear someone who sounds uncertain, even when you're talking about something you know perfectly. Let me show you what this looks like in a real sales scenario. A prospect says, "I'm not sure this is right for us right now." Sarah, thinking about grammar, responds, "I understand your concern. However, I believe that if we were to examine the return on investment more carefully, you would find that this solution could be beneficial for your organization." Technically perfect, grammatically flawless, but it sounds like a robot. Carlos handles the same objection differently. "I get it. Look, I'm not here to convince you of anything, but what if I could show you exactly how this pays for itself in the first month? Would that change things?" His grammar isn't perfect, but his response feels human, natural, like something a trusted advisor would say. Native speakers break grammar rules constantly, especially when they're excited or emotional. During buying moments, when prospects are feeling pressure or excitement, they don't speak in complete sentences. They say things like, "Yeah, but what about," or "I don't know if," or "the thing is." Your perfectly constructed sentences create distance during these emotional moments. You sound like you're reading from a script while they're speaking from their heart. This distance becomes even more obvious during high-pressure moments. When a prospect throws an objection at you, they're not looking for a grammatically correct response. They're looking for someone who gets it, someone who understands their world. When you respond with perfect grammar, you signal that you're not from their world. You're an outsider trying to sound professional. The psychological impact goes deeper than you think. When prospects hear overly formal speech patterns, their brains categorize you as other, not one of us. This happens in seconds before you even get to your value proposition. They start wondering, is this person really going to understand our business? Can they relate to our problems? Perfect grammar can actually signal that you're trying too hard to impress them instead of just helping them. Here's what happens in your brain during objection handling when you're focused on grammar. The prospect says something unexpected. Your brain immediately starts two processes: figuring out what to say and checking if it's grammatically correct. This creates a delay. In sales, delays kill momentum. While you're making sure your sentence structure is perfect, the prospect is losing interest. They're checking their phone, they're thinking about their next meeting. Grammar obsession creates a mental filter that slows down everything. You can't be spontaneous because spontaneity might lead to mistakes. You can't match the prospect's energy because that might mean using incomplete sentences. You can't build real rapport because rapport happens in the spaces between perfect sentences. You end up sounding like you're translating everything in your head before you speak. This is why high-ticket closers with perfect grammar are still losing deals. They sound like textbooks when prospects need trusted advisors. They sound like they're giving presentations when prospects need conversations. They sound like they're from a different world when prospects need someone who gets their world. The real skills that matter in sales aren't about grammar perfection. They're about processing what prospects say and responding in real time like a native speaker would. This means matching their energy, their pace, their emotional state. It means using the same informal patterns patterns they use. It means sounding like someone they'd grab coffee with, not someone they'd hire to proofread their emails. The average native English speaker talks at 150 words per minute, but during heated sales objections, that number jumps to 180 to 220 words per minute. This isn't just a small increase. This is the difference between following a conversation and drowning in it. Most international closers train their English at classroom speeds, maybe 100 to 120 words per minute. Then they get on real sales calls and face prospects who are firing objections at nearly double that speed. Think about what this means for your brain. You're processing language at 120 words per minute. The prospect is upset about pricing and starts talking at 200 words per minute. Your brain can't keep up. You catch maybe 60% of what they're saying. You miss the real objection buried in their rapid-fire response. You end up responding to what you think they said instead of what they actually said. This happens to international closers every single day. The speed gap gets worse when emotions run high. During price discussions, prospects don't slow down to help you understand. They speed up. When they're excited about your solution, they talk faster. When they're stressed about making a decision, they talk faster. When they're angry about something, they talk faster. All the moments that matter most in sales happen at speeds that leave most international closers scrambling. Here's what happens in your brain when you're processing at 120 words per minute, but the prospect is firing objections at 200 words per minute. Your brain starts making choices. It focuses on the words it can catch and fills in the gaps with assumptions. You hear price and budget and not sure, and your brain creates a story about what the prospect said. But you miss the part where they said compared to other solutions or right now or without seeing more data. These missing pieces change everything. Native speakers do something that makes this even harder. When they get excited or stressed, they compress words, drop syllables, and blend sounds together. I don't know if this is going to work becomes I don't know if this is going to work. What are you talking about becomes what are you talking about? I have got to think about it becomes I got to think about it. Your English training didn't prepare you for this. You learned clean, separated words. Real prospects speak in compressed, blended sounds. This creates a cascade effect that kills deals. When you miss 20% of what someone says, you lose context for the next 40% of their speech. It's like missing every fifth word in a sentence. Your brain tries to fill in the gaps, but it guesses wrong. The prospect says, I'm not sure this makes sense for our Q4 budget given what happened last quarter. You catch not sure, budget, and last quarter. Your brain creates a story about budget problems, but they were actually talking about timing, not money. You respond to a budget objection when they had a timing concern. The speed differential creates the dreaded awkward pause that kills sales momentum and breaks rapport. The prospect finishes talking. You need 3 seconds to process what they said and figure out your response. That 3-second pause feels like forever. The prospect notices. They start wondering if you understood them. They start repeating themselves. They start talking slower, like they're talking to someone who doesn't speak English well. The power dynamic shifts. You're no longer the expert consultant, you're the person who needs extra help to keep up. This pause problem gets worse during the specific moments in sales calls where speed matters most. Objection handling requires instant responses. When a prospect says, "This seems expensive," you need to respond immediately with confidence. If you pause to process and translate, you look uncertain about your own pricing. Price discussions move fast because prospects are uncomfortable. They want to get through the money conversation quickly. If you can't keep up with their pace, they assume you're not comfortable with money either. Closing sequences require back and forth energy. When you can't match their speed, you can't create the momentum needed to get them to say yes. The problem isn't that you don't know English. The problem is that you learned English at one speed and prospects speak at another speed. Native speakers naturally adjust their speed based on the situation. Casual conversations happen at 150 words per minute. Excited explanations jump to 180 words per minute. Heated objections reach 220 words per minute. Your brain needs to process at all these speeds without missing the emotional context that determines how you should respond. This is how fast native English speakers actually talk during high-pressure sales calls. Fast enough to leave most international closers scrambling to catch up while million-dollar opportunities slip away in the spaces between words they couldn't process quickly enough. The closers who succeed aren't the ones with perfect grammar or the biggest vocabulary. They're the ones who develop the listening skills that let them stay in the conversation when the speed picks up. The difference between a $10,000 closer and a $100,000 closer isn't what they say. It's what they hear that others miss. Elite closers have developed superhuman listening abilities that let them catch microsignals others miss completely. They hear things in conversations that average closers don't even know exist. They pick up on tiny voice changes, pause patterns, and word choices that reveal exactly what prospects are thinking before prospects even know they're thinking it. Most international closers operate with surface-level listening, while million-dollar opportunities hide in the spaces between words. They hear the words but miss the music. They catch the content but lose the context. They understand what prospects say but completely miss what prospects mean. This listening gap costs them deals every single day. While they're focused on processing vocabulary and grammar, top closers are reading the emotional roadmap that leads to closed deals. Let me show you what this looks like in real scenarios. A prospect says, "That's interesting," with a slight upward inflection at the end. Average closers hear interest and keep pitching. Elite closers hear the question mark in their tone. They know this person wants more details about something specific. They stop and ask, "What part caught your attention?" The prospect reveals their real concern, and the closer addresses it directly. Same words, completely different outcomes. Top closers pick up on hesitation patterns that signal buying readiness. When a prospect says, "I need to think about it," with a falling tone and a pause before think, they're actually saying, "I want this, but I'm scared." When they say the same words with a rising tone and no pause, they're saying, "I'm not convinced yet." The words are identical, the meaning is opposite. Elite closers hear these differences and respond accordingly. Average closers give the same response to both situations. Cultural context affects listening in ways most international closers never consider. American prospects communicate differently than European or Asian prospects, with different emphasis patterns. Americans put emotional weight on different words. When an American says, "I love this solution, but the timing isn't right," they're emphasizing love to soften the rejection. When a German says the same thing, they're probably being literal about both parts. If you miss these cultural listening cues, you respond to the wrong message. Elite closers master the concept of listening for what's not said. They detect underlying concerns through tone, pace, and word choice. When a prospect talks quickly about budget, they're comfortable with money. When they slow down and lower their voice, budget is a real concern. When they use words like probably and might, they're uncertain. When they use definitely and absolutely, they're convinced. Native-level listeners catch these subtle signals automatically. Here's how you identify the specific vocal cues that indicate buying readiness versus information gathering mode. Ready-to-buy prospects ask specific questions about implementation, timelines, and next steps. Their voice has energy and urgency. Information gathering prospects ask general questions about features and comparisons. Their voice stays flat and analytical. Ready prospects interrupt you with questions. Information gathering prospects wait politely for you to finish. Ready prospects use when language. Information gathering prospects use if language. Advanced listening allows closers to predict objections before they're voiced and prepare responses accordingly. They hear the vocal stress on certain words that signals upcoming concerns. When a prospect says, "This looks good," but their voice drops on good, an objection is coming. When they say, "I can see this working," but pause before working, they have doubts about implementation. Elite closers hear these early warning signals and address concerns before they become objections. The vocal patterns that reveal true prospect state go deeper than words. Excitement makes voices rise in pitch and speed up. Concern makes voices drop and slow down. Confusion creates uneven rhythm with lots of pauses. Certainty creates smooth flowing speech. Deception creates vocal tension and higher pitch. Trust creates relaxed, natural rhythm. These patterns exist in every language, but each culture expresses them differently. Elite closers use vocal mirroring to build deeper rapport. When prospects speak softly, they lower their voice. When prospects get excited, they match their energy. When prospects speak slowly and carefully, they slow down too. This isn't conscious mimicry. It's unconscious synchronization that happens when you're really listening to someone's emotional state, not just their words. Here's what happens to your closing rate when you miss these subtle emotional cues. You end up selling to the wrong emotional state at the wrong time. You push when prospects need reassurance. You slow down when they're ready to move fast. You give logical responses to emotional concerns. You address surface objections objections while real concerns stay hidden. You miss buying signals and keep pitching past the close. The specific listening skills that separate $10,000 closers from $100,000 closers come down to one core ability: hearing emotional buying signals in real time. Elite closers know exactly when prospects shift from skeptical to interested, from interested to convinced, from convinced to ready. They hear these shifts in vocal tone, pace, and energy before prospects even realize they've changed their minds. This real-time emotional reading lets them guide conversations toward decisions instead of just delivering information. These advanced listening skills determine everything that happens in those critical first moments where listening ability makes or breaks the entire sales interaction. Neuroscience shows that prospects make unconscious trust decisions about your English competence within the first 3 seconds of hearing you speak. 3 seconds. That's how long you have to establish credibility before their brain decides whether you're trustworthy or not. Most international closers don't even realize this is happening. They think they have the whole call to prove themselves. But the truth is, by the time you finish saying, "Hello, thanks for taking the time to speak with me today," the prospect has already categorized you as either an insider or an outsider. Your English is being judged instantly before you even get to your value proposition, before you mention your product, before you ask discovery questions, before you demonstrate value. The prospect's brain is running a background process that analyzes your speech patterns and makes snap judgments about your competence. This happens below conscious awareness. They're not thinking, "This person has an accent," they're feeling something seems off, or "This person sounds confident." Research shows how quickly prospects categorize speakers as insider or outsider based purely on speech patterns. The brain uses vocal characteristics like accent and intonation to make these rapid assessments. Within seconds, prospects unconsciously decide whether you belong in their world or not. This isn't about racism or conscious bias. It's about cognitive shortcuts that helped humans survive. The brain asks, "Is this person like me? Can I trust them? Do they understand my world?" The specific vocal elements that trigger trust or distrust come down to rhythm, intonation, pause patterns, and stress placement. Rhythm is how your words flow together. Native speakers have natural rhythm patterns that sound musical. When your rhythm is off, you sound robotic or uncertain. Intonation is how your voice rises and falls. Americans use specific intonation patterns to show confidence and authority. Pause patterns matter because native speakers pause in predictable places. When you pause in the wrong spots, you sound like you're translating in your head. Stress placement is which syllables you emphasize. Get this wrong and words become harder to understand. Even minor pronunciation issues can create subconscious barriers that require extra effort to overcome throughout the entire call. You might think a small pronunciation error doesn't matter, but your brain has to work harder to understand unclear speech. This creates cognitive load. When prospects have to concentrate on understanding your words, they have less mental energy to focus on your message. They start to tune out. They miss important points. They remember less of what you said. The compound effect kicks in when prospects question your English. Once they start wondering about your language skills, they start questioning everything else. Can this person really understand our complex business problems? Will they be able to communicate effectively with our team? Are they really an expert if they can't speak clearly? Do they represent a professional company? These doubts spread from your English to your expertise, from your expertise to your company, from your company to your solutions. This 3-second window affects the entire sales process in ways you never imagined. Rapport building becomes exponentially harder when prospects unconsciously categorize you as an outsider. They put up walls, they give shorter answers, they're less likely to share sensitive information. Objection handling gets more difficult because they're questioning your credibility from the start. Every response has to overcome their initial doubt about your competence. Closing becomes nearly impossible because buying is an emotional decision and emotions require trust. Native speakers use specific words and phrases to establish immediate credibility and authority. They say things like, "I appreciate you taking the time," instead of "thank you for your time." They say, "I'm curious about something," instead of "I have a question." They say, "Help me understand," instead of "Can you explain?" They say, "That makes sense," instead of "I understand." These phrases signal insider status. They show you think like an American business person thinks. The opening moments of a sales call are absolutely critical. Your first few words set the tone for everything that follows. If you sound uncertain or foreign in those first seconds, you're fighting an uphill battle for the rest of the call. If you sound confident and natural, prospects lean in. They want to hear what you have to say. They give you the benefit of the doubt when you make small mistakes later. Vocal confidence either opens or closes doors before you even start selling. Confidence isn't about volume or energy. It's about sounding like you belong, like you've done this before, like you're comfortable in your own skin. When prospects hear vocal confidence, they assume you're competent. When they hear uncertainty, they assume you're inexperienced. This is what the 3 critical seconds determine: whether prospects trust your English enough to trust your expertise, whether they see you as an insider who gets their world or an outsider who's trying to sell them something, whether they lean in or put up walls, whether they give you their full attention or start multitasking. Pronunciation mastery isn't about perfection. It's about crossing the credibility threshold quickly enough to earn the right to be heard. Once you cross that threshold, small imperfections don't matter. But if you don't cross it in those first 3 seconds, every word afterward becomes an uphill battle. A client lost a $50,000 deal because the prospect couldn't understand the word implementation, not because of accent, but because of stress placement. He put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. The prospect had to ask him to repeat it 3 times. By the 3rd repetition, the prospect was frustrated and embarrassed. The deal died right there. Not because the solution was wrong, not because the price was too high, because one word wasn't clear enough. This reveals a counterintuitive truth that most closers never learn. Pronunciation matters more than vocabulary when money is on the line. You can know 10,000 English words, but if you can't pronounce 100 of them clearly, you'll lose deals. Prospects don't need you to sound like a dictionary. They need you to sound like someone they can understand without effort. Big words don't impress prospects when they can't understand them. Most international closers think fancy vocabulary makes them sound smart. They use words like comprehensive and optimization and paradigm to show their English skills. But when these words aren't pronounced clearly, they create the opposite effect. Prospects stop listening to your message and start focusing on your pronunciation. They miss your value proposition because they're working too hard to decode your words. Let me tell you about Bill, a native English speaker who proves this point. Bill had a heavy British accent and unclear pronunciation. Even though English was his first language, prospects couldn't understand him. His sales numbers were terrible. He kept losing deals because clients had to ask him to repeat himself. Bill's problem wasn't vocabulary or grammar. His problem was that his pronunciation created communication barriers. If a native speaker can lose sales due to unclear speech, imagine what happens to international closers who don't prioritize pronunciation. The specific pronunciation elements that matter most in sales come down to 3 things: word stress, rhythm patterns, and clear consonant sounds. Word stress is which syllable you emphasize. Americans stress syllables in specific patterns. Get it wrong and the word becomes hard to recognize. Rhythm patterns are how words flow together in sentences. Native speakers use predictable rhythm that sounds natural. Clear consonant sounds matter because consonants carry meaning. When you mumble consonants, words blend together and become unclear. Mispronouncing key sales terms can undermine your entire presentation. Words like ROI, implementation, and guarantee appear in every sales conversation. If prospects can't understand these basic terms, they question your expertise. These aren't small mistakes. They're credibility killers. Here's what happens psychologically when prospects have to work to understand you. Their brain splits attention between processing your words and processing your message. This creates cognitive load. When people experience cognitive load, they get tired faster. They lose interest. They start multitasking. They mentally check out and stop listening actively. Your brilliant solution doesn't matter if their brain is too busy decoding your pronunciation to absorb your pitch. The moment prospects realize they're struggling to understand you, they make unconscious decisions about your competence. They think, if this person can't communicate clearly, can they really solve our complex problems? This doubt spreads to everything else you say. Your expertise gets questioned. Your company's credibility gets questioned. Your solution gets questioned, all because of unclear pronunciation. Crystal clear pronunciation of even basic words creates an impression of competence and attention to detail. When you pronounce simple words perfectly, prospects assume you handle complex tasks perfectly too. Clear pronunciation signals that you pay attention to details. In sales, attention to detail suggests you'll pay attention to their needs. It suggests you'll deliver what you promise. It suggests you're the kind of person they can trust with important decisions. As one expert puts it, if you have bad pronunciation, people will not pay attention to what you're talking about, they will not buy from you, and they will not trust you. This isn't about having a perfect accent. This is about being understood clearly. When prospects can't understand your words, they can't understand your value. When they can't understand your value, they can't justify spending money with you. The same expert explains, if you have good English, people will trust you. Notice he doesn't say perfect English or accent-free English. He says good English. Good English means clear pronunciation that allows easy understanding. It means prospects can focus on your message instead of working to decode your words. This is why pronunciation matters more than vocabulary when closing deals, because confused prospects don't buy regardless of your product knowledge. You can know everything about your solution, but if you can't communicate it clearly, that knowledge is useless. Prospects buy from people they understand. They trust people they can communicate with easily. They choose solutions presented by people who sound confident and clear. The advanced English speakers who succeed in sales don't just pronounce words correctly, they pick up on subtle emotional cues that others miss completely. While you're focusing on words, native level closers are reading emotional frequencies that tell them exactly when to push and when to pull back. They operate on a completely different level of communication. While average closers hear vocabulary and grammar, elite closers hear the emotional undertones that actually drive buying decisions. They pick up on micro changes in voice tone that signal when a prospect is getting excited. They notice pace shifts that reveal concern. They catch energy changes that show buying readiness. This hidden layer of English communication exists beyond vocabulary and grammar. It's the emotional subtext that carries the real meaning in sales conversations. When a prospect says, "This looks good," the words might be positive, but their tone tells the real story. A flat, monotone delivery means they're not convinced. A rising, energetic tone means they're getting excited. Same words, opposite emotions. Most international closers miss this completely. Missing these subtle emotional cues leads to mistimed closes, inappropriate pressure, and lost deals. You end up pushing when prospects need space. You slow down when they're ready to move fast. You give logical responses to emotional concerns. You address surface-level objections while real emotional barriers stay hidden. This happens because you're listening to words instead of feelings. Let me show you what this looks like in real scenarios. A prospect says, "I need to think about it," with a slow, heavy tone and long pauses. Their emotional state is overwhelmed. They want the solution but feel pressured. The right response is to slow down and give them space. Another prospect says the same words with a quick clipped tone and no pauses. Their emotional state is skepticism. They're not convinced yet. The right response is to address their doubts directly. Voice tone carries emotional weight that changes everything. When prospects talk about budget with energy and confidence, money isn't their real concern. When they lower their voice and speak carefully about price, budget is a genuine issue. When they speed up talking about implementation, they're excited about moving forward. When they slow down discussing timelines, they're worried about the process. Pace changes reveal emotional shifts that most closers completely miss. Excited prospects talk faster. Concerned prospects slow down. Confused prospects have uneven rhythm with lots of stops and starts. Confident prospects maintain steady pace. Deceptive prospects speed up when they're not being honest. These pace patterns exist in every conversation, but you have to know how to read them. Energy shifts signal different emotional states throughout the call. High energy means engagement and interest. Dropping energy means losing interest or facing concerns. Rising energy means growing excitement. Flat energy means emotional disconnection. Elite closers track these energy changes and adjust their approach accordingly. Cultural differences in emotional expression create additional barriers for international closers reading American prospects. Americans express excitement with higher pitch and faster pace. They show concern with lower pitch and slower pace. They signal confidence with steady rhythm. They reveal uncertainty with broken rhythm. Europeans might express these same emotions differently. Asians might use different vocal patterns entirely. The difference between hearing "I need to think about it" as words versus hearing it as an emotional state comes down to vocal analysis. As words, it's an objection to overcome. As an emotional state, it's a feeling to address. The prospect might be feeling overwhelmed, uncertain, pressured, or skeptical. Each emotional state requires a different response. You can't handle all of them the same way. Specific vocal patterns indicate different emotional states in English-speaking prospects. Excitement creates higher pitch, faster pace, and more energy. Concern creates lower pitch, slower pace, and careful word choice. Confusion creates uneven rhythm, lots of pauses, and questioning tone. Buying readiness creates steady pace, confident tone, and forward-looking language. Each pattern requires a different sales approach. Advanced closers use emotional mirroring and matching to build deeper rapport and guide prospects toward decisions. When prospects speak softly, they lower their voice. When prospects get excited, they match that energy. When prospects slow down, they slow down too. This creates unconscious connection. Prospects feel understood and heard. Trust builds naturally. This mirroring isn't conscious copying, it's emotional synchronization. Elite closers automatically adjust their emotional frequency to match their prospects. They become emotional chameleons who adapt to whatever state will build the strongest connection. This skill separates good closers from great ones. Here's what happens to your closing rate when you miss these subtle emotional cues. You end up selling to the wrong emotional state at the wrong time. You give excited responses to concerned prospects. You give careful responses to excited prospects. You push logical solutions for emotional problems. You miss buying signals and keep pitching past the close. The emotional frequency you're missing determines whether prospects trust you, engage with you, and ultimately buy from you. Words communicate information. Emotions create connection. Sales happen in the emotional space between words. When you learn to read and respond to these emotional frequencies, you don't just become a better closer. You become someone prospects want to work with. These emotional reading skills work together with all the other fluency abilities to create true sales superpowers. Just like physical muscles, your English fluency has fast twitch and slow twitch fibers, and most closers are only training one type. Think about it. When you go to the gym, you don't just work your biceps and ignore your chest. You don't spend months on cardio and skip strength training. But that's exactly what most international closers do with their English. They focus on grammar and ignore pronunciation. They build vocabulary but skip listening practice. They create imbalanced fluency muscles that fail the moment sales pressure hits. Fluency isn't one skill, but a system of interconnected abilities that must be developed together. Most people think fluency means speaking fast or knowing lots of words, but real fluency is like physical fitness. It requires multiple components working together. You can't run a marathon with strong legs but weak lungs. You can't close deals with perfect grammar but poor listening skills. The closers who succeed understand that fluency is a complete system. Traditional English learning methods create imbalanced fluency muscles that fail under sales pressure. Schools teach grammar rules for months but give you 5 minutes to practice speaking. Apps focus on vocabulary but ignore emotional communication. Courses promise fluency but only train 1 or 2 components. When you get on a real sales call, these imbalanced skills collapse. Your grammar knowledge doesn't help when prospects talk at 200 words per minute. Your vocabulary doesn't matter if you can't pronounce key words clearly. The Fluency framework breaks down into 6 components that must be developed to a similar level. These are confidence, accent clarity, grammar automation, active vocabulary, listening comprehension, and speaking experience. Each component supports the others. Weakness in one area sabotages strength in others. Like a wheel that needs all spokes to be similar lengths, your fluency needs all 6 areas developed equally. Confidence means the ability to express oneself without fear of judgment, allowing for the freedom to make mistakes. This isn't about being loud or aggressive. It's about taking everything you know and putting it out there without worrying what people think. When you lack confidence, you hesitate. You second guess yourself. You sound uncertain even when you know the answer. Prospects hear this uncertainty and question your expertise. Accent clarity focuses on pronunciation and intonation to ensure clear communication. This isn't about sounding American, it's about being understood easily. Working on your accent means working on the performance of your English. When your accent is clear, prospects focus on your message instead of struggling to understand your words. When it's unclear, they get tired from the mental effort and tune out. Grammar automation involves using correct grammar when speaking, not just knowing the rules. When it comes to grammar, it's about where your struggles are, not perfect textbook knowledge. You need grammar to flow automatically so you can focus on connecting with prospects. If you're thinking about verb tenses during objection handling, you're not really listening to the prospect's concerns. Active vocabulary means using words regularly without conscious effort. You don't need to learn more words to boost your fluency. You need to focus on your active vocabulary, the words you actually use in conversation. Passive vocabulary is words you recognize but never speak. Active vocabulary is words that come out naturally when you need them. Sales happens with active vocabulary. Listening comprehension affects confidence and communication more than any other skill. The more you're comfortable with what you're hearing, the more you start noticing nuances, ways that people speak, pronunciation, expressions. When you can't follow fast native speech, you lose confidence. When you miss emotional cues, you respond inappropriately. Strong listening skills make everything else easier. Speaking experience puts all other areas into practice. You need to speak as much as possible to put it all together. This isn't just any speaking. It's deliberate practice that challenges all 6 components simultaneously. Reading aloud builds pronunciation. Conversation practice builds confidence. Role-playing builds listening skills. Each type of speaking practice strengthens different fluency muscles. These elements must be developed in parallel, like a workout routine that targets different muscle groups. You can't master one area, then move to the next. They need to grow together. When confidence improves, accent clarity becomes easier. When listening comprehension gets stronger, active vocabulary expands. When grammar becomes automatic, speaking experience becomes more natural. Weakness in one area sabotages strength in others. Imagine having perfect grammar but no confidence. You know exactly what to say but hesitate to say it. Or having great vocabulary but poor pronunciation. You use impressive words that prospects can't understand. Or having strong confidence but weak listening skills. You sound sure of yourself while completely missing what prospects actually said. The most successful international closers treat English fluency like athletic training, with systematic practice and measurable progress. They identify where they are positioned in each area. They create specific exercises for weak components. They practice regularly with clear goals. They measure improvement over time. They understand that fluency is a skill that requires ongoing development. This complete framework transforms English from a barrier into a competitive advantage for high-ticket sales. When all 6 components work together, you don't just speak English, you communicate with native-level effectiveness. You hear what prospects really mean. You respond with confidence and clarity. You build trust through natural conversation. You close deals because language becomes a bridge instead of a wall. These aren't just language skills. They're the foundation of a $1 million sales career that transcends borders and cultures. When you master the fluency framework, you don't just speak better English. You communicate with the confidence and clarity that opens doors to premium markets worldwide. Stop treating English as a subject to study and start treating it as a sales tool to master through deliberate practice. Your fluency development is the highest ROI investment you can make as an international closer. Every hour you spend building these skills multiplies your earning potential for years to come. Start today.